Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind. A hearty hello and welcome to episode 112 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. We keep your town squares notice board posted with the latest news and views about Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the upcoming MMORPG by Visionary Realms. This week, parchments are posted that include a recap of VR's recent visit with CohhCarnage, a discussion about factions, and it's on to part 2 of the Tales from the Fire in The Lore You Know. So, have your second breakfast, restock your pipeweed, and gather your party, and join me, Theric, and my Eternum co-host, Desrin, in this week's Rewind. So, Desrin, I said Eternum because I know you witnessed my gnome's untimely death jumping into the hole in EverQuest in our event earlier this week, trying to escape a very vengeful paladin. So I'm asking you for a corpse summon here. How's my faction with the Eternum this week?
Well, I don't know about the Eternum, but your faction's great with me, man. I will, and I promise I will not charge nearly as much as they will. For sure. Just a bit of loot, just a bit of loot.
Yeah. And you're not gonna steal an item that's lost in transit during my.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
Okay. I will say that was one heck of a finale. And I love that you said vengeful because I really think Nathan's starting to get converted here.
I'm going to give a little teaser way out in front here, but we have a video coming out that might shed some light on Nathan's true nature, but I don't want to spoil the fun, but Drax all over that. Anyway, you know what we should do? We should read our adventure party.
That's right.
Because we have Ziplocks on the Darkmer Rogue, we've got Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Coat on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scar Bard, Wiki-Woo on the Human Enchanter, Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Horsasaurus on the Human Warrior, Fury Wrath on the Archai Summoner, Pavejo on the Gnome Wizard, Theldrin on the Darkmer Paladin, and new member Sarah Avienda on the Ember Elf Ranger. So check out the graphic, and you can also check out the scrolling banner for the rest of the show. That's going to have everybody else's name in it who joined via the super chat. As always, we want to thank everybody for your support for the show. We have our Patreon campaign that you can go and check out, and that has the perks and benefits associated with those 2 tiers. And then you can also join, like I said, using the super chat function during the YouTube premiere if you want to do that as well. So there's a couple options for you. But again, as we always say, just hanging out with us every week is the best support you can provide because it's the community and we love hanging out and just being with everybody. We're always amazed. And last week, again, another big crowd during the premiere. Desiree, you and I talked about it afterwards. So
yeah.
What do you think? Are you ready to enjoy the support of our friends and community and get on with the show?
Yeah, always. And I think we've got a nice one here for everyone. So let's do it.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. Right on. Okay, so starting off with our VR news and notes, we got a rare midweek VR stream this time. And we heard from VR's CEO, Mr. Chris Rowan, and creative director, Mr. Chris Perkins, as they sat down with CohhCarnage on July 27th. Last week, we had talked about, how our hopes and, what we wanted out of the stream, how they were going to define, what those big financial investments they got, how that would impact development. And I think we got that. We'll talk about it and we'll sort of dig into this, but let's go through some of the highlights from the interview and starting off with staffing. So they talked about this money, this big investment that they got is being spent, a lot of it's being spent on hiring people, hiring staff. So they said they have 35 people on staff right now. 24 of those are full-time, but some of the part-timers they have, do more work than you might expect from a part-time person, just because that's the nature of the project.
Yeah. I do want to clarify that actually, because the 24 full-time, I believe in context, is actually meaning that's like the equivalent. So they have 35 people hired, and that's the equivalent of 24 full-time. So I wouldn't say they have 24 full-time people, but they have the equivalent hours, maybe, is I think how he meant that.
Right. Okay, that's a good clarification. Yeah, I didn't catch that. So that's important. They talked a lot about some of the positions and some of the people that they have been hiring. One of the things that was really interesting they talked about was Chris Rowan said they've appointed somebody as the conduct and security manager. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And they defined it a little bit. Joppa talked about, this is their main role is going to be dealing with exploits and cheating. And he used duping as an example. It wasn't clear exactly at first what this role was. I was actually quite interested. But they said they expect VR to be very involved in this, keeping this role staffed, keeping this role, putting some priority on this role. I think that's really important because one of the questions that we get all the time, in the comments or wherever is, how is VR going to deal with cheaters? How are they going to deal with, bans and exploits and this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
So they're actually, actively, hiring into this role right now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it just shows that they are actually committed to it, that they're thinking about it well before release,
Yeah, definitely. They said they have more targeted positions that are set for hiring when the funds are available. They commented on internships. They don't have any internships right now. Said maybe next summer, hopefully. They haven't really commit to that. But they did commit to, which I thought was interesting, Desiree, was a guide program. And this gets brought up actually all the time because it harkens back to, EverQuest. It harkens back to the old days of MMOs when, you had guides in the world ready to, interact with the players on a moment's notice. They said, quote, they've got these the guide program documented and ready to go. So I guess that could mean a couple things. They might just have that outlined on paper, or maybe there's more that they have set up. I don't know. What did you think of the guide program being sort of given some, promoted a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that's like an outline thing. Like they probably have an idea how they want to do it. That's, written down, broken down for internal, like scrutiny, to try to figure that out as it continues in the game's development. But I know a lot of people have just so many amazing memories, including the staff from guide programs. And so I feel like this is an obvious one, but at the same time, I'm sure so many people that have had great experiences with guides are really happy to see that,
I agree. I feel like that's a lost thing. It's one of those things that just doesn't exist anymore, and created a lot of good memories. I really don't recall anybody having a bad experience with guides, although I'm sure they're out there. So, calm down. I know they exist. But I just feels like a community thing. It feels like a very social thing to have in a game is an active guide program. So I really like that announcement. That sort of stuck with me. So basically the impacts of these investments, they're hiring more people, they're growing their team. We highlighted it in several past shows about what that looks like. And so that's good to see. On the subject of being an investor, like what does it mean to be an investor? We got a little bit of a definition from Chris Rowan, who talked about what it means to be an accredited investor, differentiating that from, pledges, differentiating that from somebody who's just interested in the game and, wants to support them. These are business, these are business decisions. That's his role as the CEO, is to, to work in this arena. He said, there are people who do their due diligence. They're savvy people who are, as any investor should, have the money to spend, have the money to risk, to put up at risk, because every investment's a risk, no matter what. And they're not, they're not doing it like us, where we're pledging to support the game for the benefits that we get as part of that. They're looking, it's an investment. They hope to make some money off this, as an investor should. Now, the big news here is that we found out Cohh is an investor.
Yeah.
He's not the whole 2.4 million, but he said he was a smaller part of that, which I think is really interesting. And I'm really curious, Desiree, what you think of Cohh revealing his identity as one of the investors in Pantheon.
Oh, man. A few things. First of all, I actually am just so glad, and huge props to CR for defining it, during the stream. I think it's just really important that people understand. And the way he defined it too, I thought was just, really honest. He's like, yeah, these are people that have enough money that if they lose it, it's fine. And I think that puts into context, the kind of people that actually are willing to do this for Pantheon aren't really the people that are looking to make a big buck really quick, that they're people that actually just care enough that they're willing to lose their money to hopefully get this going. And Cohh specifically, I mean, we know that Cohh's been a fan, right? But two sides of this. A, Cohh's one of the I would say more successful streamers. Has been for years. He's also obviously a fan of old MMOs and new ones, right?
Yep.
Besides me liking Cohh as a character, I would say this is a big deal because Cohh as a character aligns with VR so well. And this just kind of reiterates that even though Cohh's been streaming Pantheon, not streaming like live play during a session, like, you might bring up here, but he has played the game years and years and years and years in the past when it was, basically another game. and he's still this committed this many years in. I think it really shows that someone like Cohh is not willing to just write it off as like it's been too long and it's not worth putting money into. He's doubling down. And obviously he sees something of great promise that he saw years and years and years ago that he believes in even more now. And so, yeah.
Well, and let's be honest, he's a smart businessman. I mean, look at his channel. Look at what he's done. How he promotes himself, how he markets himself, and how he streams. I mean, people think streaming is just like you stream or you don't. Like, I've come to learn it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. It's about everything. It's about all the little things you do. He's super smart at it. He wouldn't invest in a company. He wouldn't, like most investors, they don't invest to lose their money. They can afford to lose it, but they don't do it to lose money. They do it to make money. He's investing to make money. Now, he's in a unique position for sure because he's a streamer, right? This, does this investment give him access in some way? Who knows? Probably. I don't think we can.
I would say that he'd probably have access either way, just because obviously, him and Visionary Realms have been,
right.
Like you even mentioned, they're not paying me to do this or whatever. And now it's the opposite.
We have evidence of that. Yeah. Like we have evidence of it from, going far back, like you said, he's been doing this without being a paid sponsor. So now he's just, taking it to the next level and saying, I see where you're at. I feel like I can help get you to where you need to be and where this game needs to be. So I have nothing but good feelings about it because I would love, and I think we said about the companies, right? People who invest in this company have to be the right fit for VR. Cohh fits. He just fits.
So you can imagine like the other investors, because, this is a group of investors all at the same time, same terms, that are probably just more Cohhs. I would argue that they must be just as aligned as Cohh is. And if that doesn't, give you some confidence about, not having investors like trying to make the game something it's not, which they've been super clear is just not going to happen. But if they're getting people like Cohh and that is their, investment pool, that's a good descriptor of what they're actually looking for, I think. And so positive.
I would agree. Yeah, totally right on point there. I think that's perfect. And the big exciting thing is we're going to see Cohh in action come September because he's going to be streaming in the next pre-alpha session.
Yes.
So, now this is really interesting, and I want to know what you think about this too. But like, I'm very curious what this is going to look like because when we've seen him play in the past, he plays with the devs, and I don't recall ever seeing him play as a group in any game. I mean, I don't watch his streams as often as anybody else probably, but like I've never seen him play as a group with a team. So what's that going to look like? Is he going to have a team of people playing with him? Is he going to just look for a group in game? I doubt it. That would seem like
you might be surprised. I actually watched him stream EQ not too long ago because he played on one of the TLPs, which actually will end up coming up later in the show. I just realized. But from what I can tell, he just joined a group and did stuff. Yeah.
Did they know who he was? Was there like...
maybe.
Hey. So if he's playing in the pre-alpha and it's during the pre-alpha session and it's open to the other people who are playing in pre-alpha, are they going to be like, where's Cohh? Like, are we going to be hunting for him? Because
and I brought this up on the Discord too.
I wonder about that because that seems like it could very well happen. I mean, you have to understand that the VIP community is not huge. It's not like the alpha community where we're talking about thousands and thousands of, well, I don't remember the number that VR's given. They've said something like 8,000 or something like that. Anyway, the VIP community is much smaller. So if Cohh's playing, people are going to be, interested and wanting to know, wanting to see what's going on. So I'm very curious of what this is going to look like, but I don't even care, because I think it's exciting, and he's going to get eyes on this game. He's going to get more eyes than he's had in the past, because this is going to be without devs, as far as we know, without devs guiding him and sort of, more of a controlled stream. This is going to be very much a free form thing from what we've been told.
That's what it seems. So. Yeah, we'll see if we get some more details, but this is an exciting thing, I think, for everyone involved.
Yeah, and it also confirmed the PA test in September for everybody else, for all the VIPs, right? So,
well, there could be one before that, just to be clear. Sure. But it does confirm that yes, we will be getting a PA session in September. So right on.
Yeah. Look at you, so optimistic. You're like, we could get one tomorrow. You never know.
I'm just pointing out that doesn't mean that's how long it will be until the next one, because that's not what was said. It may be, but I would think, if they're after a year, not quite a year of no PA tests, but a very long time since that last test, not to mention all of the foundational systems that have been, put in and swapped out and all that, like immediately showing that to 15,000, plus people live, I would imagine they would want a little bit of testing the waters first, but maybe who knows?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point, actually. That's a good reason for them to do that. So, yeah, I'd be up for it. And then the last thing from this stream that I thought, there was a couple of little notes here that are worthy of mentioning. And in the realm of game development updates, they talked about, up to now, the focus has been on programming, and they're shifting now to focus on art and content. They did say the game building tools are, quote, mostly finished. And they're now ready to build the game efficiently. So we've heard things like this before. I'm glad to hear that. We've seen some of the art and content lately. The programming, that is a good thing, that they don't really need to focus on that. Although they just hired Steve Clover as a senior programmer, so
yeah.
I don't know how that sort of jives. But and they did say Steve Clover is putting the finishing touches on their near-death system. So that's, I guess that makes sense. I guess that sort of goes together. They confirmed again that Vinyl is integrated now, running. Of course, there's some glitches to work out, but Vinyl, their networking solution, is integrated and running. So Good to hear.
Yep.
And this last piece, Desmond, I'm going to ask you what you think of this, because it was a sort of a new mechanic, not mechanic, but more like a new, I don't know, something that they defined as, called it morph spawning. And basically it's a way of dealing with rare spawns, placeholders for rares. So in the typical sense, you think of, you kill the placeholder, there's a chance that it's the rare spawns as a result. Now they're doing something. They're saying that there will be placeholders for rares that need to live long enough and will just naturally morph into the rare spawn. They said, quote, a wide variety, it gives them a wide variety of content consumption, and basically results in the players, finding these targets. It's interesting to me that what kind of gameplay this will create. Sounds like there might be the potential for, like, really waiting around and not doing anything in the hopes that it morphs into a rare spawn. Although it might be, a lesser camped mob that has this ability or this trait, so it's not one that's always being watched, because I don't really want to just sit around watching a mob. I want to sit around killing mobs, like, I don't know. What did you think about this one? It's kind of neat. It's kind of
okay. So this, I was actually really hoping that someone would make a forum post about this, because there's a lot of discussion in the Discord, which, I can't talk about this. And I would love to get into it. But we don't have a lot of public details on this. So I'm just going to say, I think it's more just, hey, we have more ways that we can do this than just your classic placeholder, kill it, hope it spawns the named, or just a timer. I think they're just trying to be clear that it's not always going to be the same thing. And without a lot more with this particular mechanic, I could see it going a lot of ways. It might not just be, a placeholder that you just have to like not kill, but it perhaps is, from a variety of mobs, of maybe a certain name or whatever that, one of them eventually can morph into it, or it could, I think they could do a lot with this system. I think it brings up a lot of immediate concerns. But overall, I want to hear more about their ideas around this, and maybe just around all of their different ideas for spawning mobs or named mobs, because I think this is just more like a small piece of the puzzle, not something that is going to be all the time, but maybe more of a, hey, oh, wow, no one's been to that branch of the dungeon in a while, and there's a mob that I've never seen before. That's crazy. I think that's more what they're going for than,
Yeah, another variable to add into the mix. But so rather than, like you say, rather than speculate on it with very little information, we wait for a little more. But maybe it's a future community discussion because somebody makes a post about this, and lots of people have different ideas. Hint, hint, hint. Make a community post. We might discuss it because this is one of those things where I could see a lot of people having different ideas, and that sort of being a really interesting discussion. So maybe we'll leave that one for now and come back to it in a future episode.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. And then the last piece I want to talk about was a tweet they put out earlier this week on their Twitter Twitter post. They said, talking about the upcoming pre-alpha testing. So the question, the advertisement was, which class are you playing in pre-alpha this summer? This really piqued my interest on two fronts. Firstly, we brought it up last week about how many pre-alpha tests there will be. During the stream, they said there's going to be several more PA tests throughout this year and into next year.
Yep.
So that affirms what we thought, that VR's ensuring this new pledge, this $750 Scion of the Black Rose pledge, has value to it and is definitely worth your while if you're doing it for the pre-alpha testing. So that was good to hear. And again, we suspected as much, but just sort of confirmed. The real question is here, what classes are going to be available during the pre-alpha test?
Yep.
So that is an open question. We don't know because the last newsletter that came out, I went back and looked at it because I wanted to remind myself, what's the latest here? And so in the classes and combat section, you'll see it if you go back and look at it. It says they've implemented the updated level 10 to 20 ability kits for the Dire Lord, Enchanter, Monk, Rogue, Shaman, and Wizard classes. So to me, that means those are the classes that'll likely be available. Do I know that for sure? No. That's simply going on the latest information from VR. So, this tweet was kind of interesting to me because on one hand, I'm very excited and I'm glad this is definitely enticing for somebody who's thinking about making this pledge. On the other hand, I would have also liked to have seen it clarified that what classes are available because I can see somebody who really likes Rangers, realizing, oh, there's no Ranger, but maybe there is. Who knows? We don't know that. Having said all that, Desiree, what was your take when you saw this advertisement / question?
Advertisement. That's kind of immediately this strikes me as like the kind of marketing you'd see in like a early access title or something.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, it put me off a little bit because if you don't follow the project closely, this could be so exciting and you could be like, oh my gosh, like I can't wait to play my summoner. And you just got a Scion of the Black Rose pledge. You're super stoked to finally play Pantheon, and half the classes are in, or not even that. And I think this could have maybe been set up a little bit better. Do I hate the idea of it? No. And I like that it's a more professional like advertisement. This is something that I would have expected as, alpha's getting closer or something like that. I just feel like with the current state of the classes, like you talked about, especially because it's almost sure that, half of them aren't ready. This just seems a bit premature, and is probably gonna give some incorrect impressions. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
I hate to be that guy, right? But
no, I'm that guy too. We're on the exact same page about this here because I just wanted, I don't want anybody, I don't want there to be blowback for VR on this because I could see it without somebody with the close knowledge who's not following the game is just seeing this for the first time, being like, oh. And so what you do when you see this, you go to Pantheon MMO, you see what classes there are, and you say, oh, look at all these classes, cool. This is one I want to play. But then you don't look at the newsletter and say, oh, you realize that only half of them might be available or whatever.
yeah,
Maybe VR surprises us. I don't take this for anything more than ridiculous optimism, but VR surprises us with something, and the classes we aren't expecting to be there are there. But you know, the bottom line is it just needed an asterisk, I think, saying
yeah,
current classes currently available for testing are this.
100%
right?
agree. That's
That's
all it
all
would
it
have
needs.
take. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, having said that, you and I are reacting the same way. I actually looked at the comments and I honestly didn't see a lot of that. So kudos, maybe VR's got a better sense of this than we do. I want to read some of the tweets because I thought they were fun and I like to see what people's reactions are to this. So we're going to go through some of the responses on Twitter. First up was Brian Christensen on Twitter. They said, really interested in trying out the Rogue. Looking at the skill list, seems almost Bard-like in utility. Should be able to split camps, pull, and mez adds, all in addition to the usual DPS, lock-picking, corpse dragging, and not to mention pilfering the guards of Kingsreach. So Brian's been watching some of the streams when Minus was playing the Rogue because there's a lot of that going on there. Although the lock-picking, I don't think we've seen.
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Corpse dragging, I don't think we've seen.
Yep, not yet.
Yeah, but the mezzing and that kind of stuff, crowd control was definitely something we've seen from the Rogue. So Brian shouldn't be disappointed if that's what they're looking for. The next up was Sylvania, and they said, Summoner, if it's out. Right? So
yeah.
I don't know, Sylvania. I hope so. But
if the Summoner is out, I just have to point out they have their roadmap is not reflecting like, or straight up, like it's saying, the bets aren't in. So, we can't have both. But
that's right.
Exactly.
Right.
So yeah, Summoner, if it's out, I like the clarification, if it's out, which, sorry, Sylvania, but
yeah, maybe next time. Galaray, sorry, I'm going to get the name right. Galarain Moonsong, very cool name, very RP name, said, as it will be my first time, I have no clue. Excited to try any of them.
Love it.
That's the right attitude to go into it because honestly, it's a pre-alpha test, right? Like, again, I want to play my class too as much as anybody, but we're going into this with, a pre-alpha testing mindset to test out the classes that they do have. So that's a good approach. Brendan H said Enchanter, and I have to commend Brendan on his emoji use here. He had the hand and then like the mesmerized face, so that's cool. And we know Enchanter's there. We've seen that in previous pre-alpha tests. Tehome's done a great job of demonstrating the Enchanter, so that's going to be exciting. And then lastly, Big Headed Gamer said, I've never played an EQ style of game, so I think I'll literally spend an hour on every one and see which one calls to me. Awesome.
Oh, man. You're in for a treat then. I could say that with confidence.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's the most valuable thing you can do for VR, not only to get your money's worth, but also to give them as much feedback as you can. I get there's some value in like spending all the time on one class and really getting the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts.
Yeah. And grouping too is a big thing.
Yeah. But having, a perspective on each of the different classes, if you spend an hour with them, that could be, from a new player experience perspective, very valuable to VR. So I really liked hearing some of those responses, and I'm excited to see, when the time comes, how some of those folks who have sprung for the new pledge think, what they like, what they didn't like, and that kind of thing. Of course, everything's under NDA, but eventually I'm sure they'll get some feedback in, and VR will do what they do and keep developing the game and as they should. So anything else, Des, before we move on from the news of the week, whether about the Cohh stream or anything regarding anything else we talked about here?
I'm good. I think we should push on.
All right, definitely. So before we get to the calendar, we got to talk about this. Look who made a video.
Oh,
Deseret, you put out your video this week. Death penalty and mechanics explained what happens when you die in Pantheon: Rise of the Fallen. Now, you did such a good job explaining this last week on the Rewind. We thought, boy, this should be a video, and sure enough, that's what we did. It's done very well, and I just think it's so clear, and like a lot of the comments reflected this, that the way you laid it out with like best option, second best, third, fourth was really awesome. So
I'm really glad it hit right, but I have to like give so much credit just to you because you made it so easy. I literally just had to write down some words and say them into a microphone. And so gotta give props back to you just for making it like so possible. I'll admit, like this was super spur of the moment. Like it was like like a Saturday. We're just like, should we make a video?
Yeah,
make a video.
Yeah, we should. Yeah. So, we got to team up more often and do these together more often because it was so much easier. Like it's so, for me, I spend so much like the wording on the script and how I'm phrasing things and the timing of it. And you just have this natural ability to just spit the information out in a logical way that makes sense. And anyway,
I'm glad we teamed up. I'm glad. I think we should do some more. We'll see how that rolls in the future.
For sure. Okay, so let's look at the calendar for Pantheon Plus, the rest of the content from our team this week. On Monday, of course, 9 o'clock Eastern, Norath After Dark. Track makes the calendar. He just put die. I don't know what that means. I think his teammates might be in trouble. He's got something planned for late night EQ crew that might not be great for them, but it's always a fun, entertaining thing to watch that go down. Tuesday night, we're streaming, of course, MMOs 101 on our Twitch channel, and we are doing our grade night for EverQuest. So tune in if you want to know what we liked, what we didn't like about EverQuest in the 6, 7, 8 weeks that we've played it now. We'll be giving out some grades. Wednesday, Benonai's got a fan fiction article called The Overlook coming to our website. That's pantheon.plus, where you can read his stuff. Thursday, 9 a.m., we've got the MMO do's and don'ts. This is YouTube content from Drac talking about, this was actually something we did in the last Tuesday night live stream where we talked about what we liked and what we didn't like in every MMO. So sort of a wide-ranging opinions on that. 8:30 that evening, Sparrow's streaming some classic WoW on her Twitch channel. On Friday, Redbeard Flynn is got a video coming out called MMOs Not Dead. And he always makes a good entertaining time, so check that out. Nathan, this is what I teased earlier. Now, this is Drac's commentary on Nathan not being a paladin. He's got video evidence of Nathan Napalm and his vengeful ways coming out 9 a.m. Saturday next week on our YouTube channel. So you can't not see that.
Yeah.
And then go to watch Nathan do Cringe Pony TV that evening, and you can comment on what you saw. So sort of some synergy going on there. But yeah, that's our week of calendar of content for August 1st through to August 7th. And it's also this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right, we're going to hit on a pretty quick community discussion this week, just for kind of the sake of, to be honest, our community spotlight is probably the biggest we've ever had, so I really want to get to that.
Which is a good sign. I mean, that's
it is
attracting people to make content for Pantheon.
Love it. But yeah, let's check out some from the official Pantheon forums and get our tickers ticking. This one is going to be from, our known Pantheon conspiracy guy, Benonai. And this is called Faction Creep Wanted. And I'll, try to do the post justice with that quick summary from my take. The gist is kind of that while Benonai is totally excited for the extensive faction gameplay that's claimed for Pantheon, there's a bit of concern about some accessibility of facilities depending on your character's faction. So I think the best examples that were given were potentially making it so you might end up with no access to vendors or, important NPCs without going across the entire continent. So Ben and I, again, I'm summarizing this. The solution would be to have maybe multiple tiers for things like that. So while your faction goes down, perhaps, every increment, the vendors make things, more expensive, pay less for your goods, until only at the very lowest faction would you become like KOS or lose access completely. And lastly, he adds that, perhaps they should add some way to disguise yourself in the cases that you do still need to access those places, even if your faction's gone overboard, or, have alternative factions even that provide similar services, like the Black Rose or the Gadai, if your Throne Fast faction is really bad. Yeah.
Interesting. I like the the disguising yourself idea.
Yes.
Interesting one.
So, it seems like he's more just kind of he wants faction to be more than just KOS or not, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because that's when you think of it, you think, is this person going to attack me on site or not?
Or not, yeah.
That's what it always boils down to.
Yeah, so, and expanding on that might add some additional gameplay and maybe some more risk and reward, so make the system feel a little bit more fleshed out, right? So
yeah, and I think this might be coming from the Eternum thing, where they talked about having faction with the Eternum. And correct me if I'm wrong, Des, but did they not say that your faction with the Eternum will matter?
I think they specifically just said that the Eternum is a faction of Terminus.
Oh,
and so
okay, yeah.
Outside of that, we're going to be extrapolating a little bit, but since factions are claimed to matter, one could think. But yeah, so let's get started with some responses. So right off the bat, we'll go with Thunderleg, who points out something that I think's really worth noting, and that is so faction-centric content is the gift that can keep on giving. The heavy lifting was done up front, and a metric ton of bells and whistles and shinies can be tacked on ad infinitum, which I think is a great point in that, we don't need a really complicated system right off the bat, but as long as it's set up in a way that can support, future expansion, it's probably the best way to go, pre-release, right?
Well, and that goes to what Benonai is saying about tiering, right? Faction tiers. So if you start off with, say 3 tiers, and then later on you want to add another layer on top of that, right? Yeah. You can. So
make it a little more granular.
Yeah. Like, so you've got, let's say, for example, you've got liked, neutral, disliked. Well, later on, you can become, rather than liked, you can become respected and then exalted, right? Like, so you could really, if the basics are in first, and this goes back to something VR talks about all the time, the tools to make the job. If you've got good tools, they can make these kinds of things, happen theoretically.
Yeah, and it might just be a matter of having the manpower to set all of that up. Maybe the tools can exist, maybe they can build that just fine, but the time it takes to go hook up all the different maybe responses or, different vendor prices and stuff, that might be pretty extensive, but as long as they can eventually, might be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of the faction or the Perception Storylines video where they showed the branching narrative trees. You know what I'm talking about? Like the actual structure, the programming structure of it. I'd like to see something like that. An explainer from VR would be cool if it dealing with the faction system, like show us how it sort of works, pull the curtain back a little bit and just show us the mechanics of a little bit.
Yeah, that would be cool someday. Yeah. So let's get to Dorothea. They seem to favor a bit more of the harsh penalties. So they say it should have real meaning and not just a veneer. Becoming kill on sight in some places, not just being hit with a 10% increase in merchant prices. So being unable to visit a bank or use an auction house or broker, and being unable to deal with merchants rather than, maybe they have a black market, but or even being unable to access mail. So I think Dorothea is on the more side of, don't kind of nickel and dime all the way until KOS, but maybe just go all the way.
Taking the opposite approach, really. It's funny because when we were playing EverQuest on Tuesday night, I needed to bind. We were going in Solus XP.
Yes.
So I needed to bind, and I had run all the way to Sol B I'm in Lava Storm, and I'm like, okay, where can I bind? And Drax says to me, he's like, well, you could bind in Neriak, but the Dark Elves hate you. I'm like, oh, right. Darn it.
Yep.
Okay, so I had to run all the way back to the tunnel to bind myself there. And again, this is new EverQuest. This is an old school EverQuest the way it used to be, because it was different back then. But the point being that there was some inconvenience for me because of my faction situation. Now, if I had grinded something to get my Dark Elf faction up, I'm sure I could have bound in Neriak, but I couldn't.
Yeah, or potentially, a bit of gameplay, because I know it's like an inconvenience, but at the same time, there's quite an adventure to be had if you could sneak in there.
So, yeah, and what if instead of just them attacking me on sight, what if I could walk up to them, talk to them, and they would say, yeah, we'll bind you for 20 plat, what if we did what Benonai is saying here, and we layered it, or what if I had like an item that like guy, some sort of mask, right? I was going to say Guise of the Deceiver, but that didn't do anything.
That's something else.
Yeah, it's something else. But the point being, like, what if there were counters to your negative faction that didn't necessarily involve faction necessarily?
It is really interesting that you mentioned that, because Benonai later in the thread adds a little bit of an extra idea, saying that maybe the guards will stop you when you're walking into the town if you have faction at a certain level. Maybe not all the way bad, but maybe if you're not concealing yourself well enough, they might ask you some questions and kind of hold you there for a moment and see if you can go in based on your answers. So I think that kind of means that you'd have to really wreck your faction to be in the case where you can't do anything. But that's a really interesting solution to having bad faction, but still maybe being able to get around it if perhaps it requires something about the town that is through perception, maybe.
So keepers, maybe tying keepers to faction somehow.
Exactly. Just some mechanic around the faction in the certain cases where you need to get in and you're willing to risk. So I love that little, and of course it makes me think of, stop right there, criminal scum.
You know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of like getting stopped at the border, like going into a country and they take you in the back room and you're never seen from again.
Oh my gosh.
Where's Bob? We haven't seen him in 2 days. It's like, well, he didn't make it.
But I could see this playing out. Maybe there is some kind of like disguise that you wear, but then, maybe you get a little bit too close to a guard. They come up, they stop you, and they ask you like, hey, what are you doing here? And you're like, and you have to bribe them. And so it doesn't necessarily keep you from going in, but it makes it so you have a potential more cost if you're not super careful. And it's just, again, expanding.
Here's a callback for you. How about this? Remember in Fortress Devair when Minos was sneaking around, or Cohh was sneaking, and he could overhear conversations that were only being had because he was stealthed?
Yes.
How about something like that working into this system? I mean, that's already in place. They showed that in Devair. So
yep.
I think you could do something with that.
Oh, that's great, man. That's great. Well, no more responses here. So let's go to Counterflesh. They seem to agree that faction changes should be a little bit more realistic than just like a kill counter, right? But, also agrees with a lot of others in this thread that first and foremost, it's got to be fun and interesting.
That is true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's Joppa. It's got to be fun. It's got to be fun.
Yep.
So if it's not fun, people aren't going to do it.
Yeah, because if it is just like, your negative 10,000 faction is basically, I killed, 400 of these, types of mobs, and that means I'm KOS. And so I have to kill 400 of these other types of mob to not be KOS. It's better than nothing, but it's really drab.
Yeah. Well, maybe instead of killing 400 peasants, you can just kill one noble to get all that faction back because they're worth more.
And listeners to the show may recall that I think last time we talked about faction, it kind of took this route, but and admittedly in the thread they kind of get more on that side as well. But onto the whole original post kind of a thing. I did want to note a post here from Vantrad, where he kind of ties that whole "the enemy of my enemy is my friend" deal, and how that should totally affect Pantheon. But it also seems like he's totally in favor of potentially really messing up your faction if you're not like tactical with your choices, and you might accidentally make multiple factions hate you if you don't play your cards right. And I think that sounds really harsh on the surface. Like, oh no, like I think the reason a lot of people are against like factions mattering in a modern game is because they're afraid that if you don't, check the wiki and make sure that
you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly, that you're just going to eventually be hated by everyone and whatever. And I think that, Vandrad kind of clearly says like that should be possible, but also it should be pretty obvious that like, hey, Thronefast and Black Rose Keep, obviously there's some tension there. So if you're against one, the other probably takes more kindly to you. It's kind of faction basics, but in a more realistic way. So it's not just killing random, snails in the middle of a forest, but something meaningful.
Well, and you have to know a little bit about the lore to make informed choices, so that I can see what he's saying, that, some people wouldn't want that. I think that you do have to tie it together. I think the lore and the faction has to be tied together in a logical way. So I'm thinking about the Eternum right now. Like if that faction does matter, if it can be changed in positive or negative way, and it has implications, so what I'm thinking like, what would a merchant of death like, what would they, or maybe I should read something, I should search, and find out something about the lore about the Eternum and find out, I can make some conclusions from that, of course. And then that's just a baseline to make sure you're not completely screwing yourself up.
Yeah. And I just gotta slide in my little bit of complete off the wall theoretical stuff. But if the Eternum faction is, variable, which I expect it would be, whoever the enemy of the Eternum is, let's say you really want to get on their good side, the reward for them must be pretty interesting if it basically makes it so that you're hated by the Eternum, right? And that is
super interesting.
Yeah, that is a really interesting seesaw there, because you're giving up potentially a gameplay related thing.
You're basically putting yourself on hardcore mode if you do that.
Exactly.
So you better get a heck of a reward. There better be something great for you to, make that choice, because you are basically saying, I'm only doing corpse runs and getting reses at that point.
But leaving that door open is just so interesting. Like, I know not everyone's going to be, really into that, right? But I think some people do want to play hardcore mode, and
agreed. I think that would be really cool, actually.
Well, okay. So before we get too carried away, I did want to grab one last thing, and it's kind of on that note of making it so you don't have to go check a website to know what's happening with your faction, right? And this idea comes from Manuk in the thread, and I really do think this could actually make the whole complex faction system a little bit easier to understand. Because again, the fear is that I'm going to do something that is irreparable and not know why. And so the idea is that perhaps there's a UI window for your factions, which, that is pretty standard. But instead of just having a bunch of bars, plus and minus, number, it actually could be some kind of tree, or I think of it like a web, maybe. Or you could think of it as those graphs that we've seen in the past dev streams. Where the factions that you haven't discovered are, grayed out, so you don't know about them yet. But as you discover factions, they can show up on the tree with all these connections, and help you understand how your decisions affect the other factions. I think this is actually a really novel idea, to have a visual representation of how things in the world are connected via faction. And if it's this kind of node web, it should be pretty easy to tell. Like, maybe, you click on Thronefast faction, you see all the connections to the various things, some you know of, some you don't know of, and just see how they're going to influence each other. I think that could be really valuable, especially to new players, right? to know what the repercussions for their actions are going to be. And
yeah. See, for me, I don't know. For me, I wouldn't want this. I wouldn't want this. I feel like it takes the mystery out of it too much. I feel like there's room here to keep the world mysterious and not know. I know you're worried about messing up your faction, but on the other hand, if you have a UI or you have an element like this, it makes everything very much more targetable. You can make long-term faction goals because you can see the connections, even if you treat it like, you put some sort of like a discovery fog or something like that in place where you can't see the long-term, faction goals. I still think that this is too visual for me. I wouldn't want this.
Really? Yeah. So the main point is that factions that you haven't discovered aren't visible. So you would only, how I see it is more just like an in-game representation of what a lot of people are going to try to track out of game. And I'm usually for systems like that, as long as it's something that you do have to discover in the game. So I think I'm a little bit more on the liberal side of information there.
Nah. Yeah, I still don't think I'm for it, but again, it's a neat idea. It's definitely a neat idea.
And it's definitely not something that's ever been stated by VR to be in the cards.
Right.
But I did have to shout that out to Minook because it is something I've never seen in an MMO before. And who knows? But
who knows?
With all the speculation and all the faction talk, I think we can give it up for this week's community discussion. But I did want to hail back to, if you happen to throw some threads on the forums that caused some good discussion, feel free to ping me on Discord and we can grab something. No guarantees, of course, but I'd love to see it. The forums are pretty active lately with the new pledges and just kind of re-emergent excitement, I guess. So yeah, get into that, and that's going to be it. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, the meat and potatoes. This is quite a big week for community content. But first, since it seems like it's been ages since we saw an introduction on the forums, I wanted to shout this out. Yeah, I don't know why. It just, people haven't been introducing themselves on the forums. So this one is actually from, I want to pronounce this right. Hopefully it's Kheldare, who posted this introduce yourself titled, "Hello, retired and ready to game." So
I'm already jealous. I want to be retired.
Oh, well, so it looks like a lot of people, Kheldare just went for that Scion of the Black Rose pledge. And, they're super eager to join in on the fun. Like a lot of us, they've played just about everything from EverQuest to modern day MMOs, but they're really missing out on some of those things that they're really, hopefully expecting for Pantheon that are not present anymore. And interestingly enough, they say they played with Cohh recently on the Agnar TLP on EQ.
Wow.
And that kind of reignited their old EQ.
Wow. So goes right back to what we said in the intro or in the news and notes section, talking about, Cohh looked for, maybe he found a group, maybe they just grouped up, organically, and it was a good time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I thought that was a really nice little tidbit. So, but yeah,
Very cool.
Welcome Kheldare to the community. I don't know if they're a viewer, but may as well.
Well, hopefully, but if not, maybe soon, and welcome for sure.
Yeah. And from here, this is really fun. So, was it last week before we saw the graphic for the race class combos by the community?
Yes.
That was fantastic, right? Well, this week we've got two. Community's been great about trying to put these infographics together to help people understand things. And the first one's going to be by Heebs. They did a little flow graph for what happens when you die. Again, we're trying to make this really simple, right? But yeah, this is comes out of a thread called Death Simplified on the official forums. They have a link to an imager post with the infographic on it. Really cool.
Yeah. So I'm gonna throw these two graphics. I'm gonna throw in the video reel, so you'll see them if you're watching this on YouTube. You'll see what we're talking about, so that you can have some context for it.
Yeah, perfect. And then the next one, this is a pretty massive one, and this is from forum user Telepath, and it's a full like pledge matrix with all of the different pledges and their benefits, all kind of stacked up and organized in this one image. And this was apparently directly in response to someone on the Cohh stream asking if they had something like that. And the response on stream was kind of like, I mean, yeah, like our pledge, kind of shows what you get, what you don't get. But Telepath like actually, puts it all together. It's really easy to understand. So yeah, props to them.
Yeah, it's similar to the race class matrix in the sort of the presentation of it, but people have been asking for, a really nice, clean way of looking at the pledges for a long time. So Telepath got a lot. I looked at this on the forums as well and got a lot of kudos for this. So
yeah,
good job.
Well deserved. I hope they actually like maybe promote that like they did with the race class combo for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, now to the videos. This is
bring on the video.
Yeah, this is quite a week. So first of all, let's kind of get all those CohhCarnage stream videos out of the way. But besides the official Pantheon channel hosting the VOD of that roundtable, Cohh also posted it on his channel. Besides that, we've got a few watch parties. One, Bazgrim actually did a watch party during the event as well. And another, actually, Sir Medieval decided to do a watch party during the stream, which was very interesting as well. So I don't know if everyone's already like streamed out. Maybe it's just me because I've had to watch it like 5-6 times now. but both of those are up on YouTube. And I'll say this probably a few times, but all the links are in the description, the show notes, whatever you want to call it. Because there's a lot of content here, and if you want a nice, easy reference, go ahead, click on that.
Yeah. I just want to say those watch parties are really useful for situations where maybe if they're doing it at a later date, like Bazgrim usually does his the day after the stream. So like I said in the beginning, this stream was in the middle of the day on a Wednesday. I couldn't watch it live. I actually was dying because everybody in the guild was watching it and commenting on it. And I was at work and I couldn't watch it for whatever reason. And so, some of these watch parties that are after the fact are really fun, and glad to see more people doing that.
Yeah, and a lot of insight too, really.
Yeah,
and I'm not big on like reaction videos, but like it sometimes is pretty nice to just see that firsthand.
And Bazgrim is smart. He does it when he does those delays. He pauses the stream to give commentary as they go along. So
yeah, I do appreciate that. I'll admit. Instead of actually in the Sir Medieval one, he mutes, I believe, right when they right when they say that they're not gonna the next or the alpha or pre-alpha, I mean, continues throughout the year and into the next year, and then like later he's like, I don't know how long pre-alpha is gonna be. I'm like, oh, well, that's because you muted it, but it happens. It happens.
Live and learn.
Then we've got the recaps. So first off, again, Bazgrim put out actually a great video, mostly focusing on the investment announcement, from the newsletter, as well as the stream, but also just with a lot of history, a lot of context. Obviously this is Bazgrim's thing, right? Like, so for folks that may not know like what Visionary Realms has kind of been through financially, it's a great video for that. Just again, context for kind of the bigger picture. And then, in addition to that, and speaking of context, actually, Renfail, they did a really interesting recap on the stream from his background of like working in the MMORPG industry. So he has a lot of insight to that announcement as someone that's dealt with these kind of things firsthand, investments and stuff like that. So honestly, this is another great addition to that stream. If you just want to get as much info out of it as possible, I definitely recommend checking this out.
Yeah, no, I like his perspective coming from somebody who's made games or, has been part of the industry and has some insights there. So I thought that was really useful.
And also kind of commemorates VR just because how he breaks it down. He's like, yeah, they said some good things. And I was like, oh, that's very reassuring, right?
Yep.
And then our buddy Redbeard Flynn, man, he did his monthly recap and yep, there's costumes.
To the surprise of nobody.
To the surprise of nobody, there are costumes. There's humor. It's just super entertaining delivery of kind of all the last month's recent news, which there's a lot of. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. I love Red.
He's not much more to say, man. He's awesome. He's one of our best friends, and I love that guy. And I can't get enough of his content.
Yep, absolutely great. And then let's do this last recap. Again, another Sir Medieval video about the investment announcement, but with some nice little shout outs. One where he quickly kind of mentions the refactor in his thoughts, which I think it was like a really nice short take, especially for his audience that, you see in the comments, a lot of people give that usual like criticism and stuff. And he just kind of really quick, he was like, yeah, so refactor, this is about how long I consider the game to be in, their current development, and then moves on. But yeah, I thought that was pretty good. He also, this is totally like self-glorifying here, but he shouts out the Pantheon community as being one of the most supportive he's ever seen. And so,
I think that's important. No, I know, and it's not self-glorifying. It's acknowledging the reality of why this community's special, what makes this community different from other communities. And I think this is really something that I was happy to hear him say, because I really feel like, this should be the mantra. This should be something, the vibe that we share and we put out there, that, we talk about your stuff, and we highlight your content, and then everybody does that for everybody. And the rising tide raises all boats.
Right.
As we've heard Joppa say that, because the more people discover your content, the more people discover our content, the more successful we all are. Right. And so this is just a little bit of a pitch there, but I'm glad seems to be, getting that.
Yep. And to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, like when we see a new content creator, like we try to reach out a lot. And I think a lot of creators in this community do. But it's one reason, like, we're really close with Red. And
exactly,
and that just really, yeah, you said it best. So I'm going to stop kind of going on about that, but it was really nice to hear that from him. Cause we've reached out to him as well, tried to, help him, make content, accurate content for Pantheon, which is, something we care about a lot, but, it's really great. And you'll see even more of that, later on. So
yeah.
And believe it or not, that's not even it for all the videos.
There's more.
There is actually more. And this one's from Tearson Vane. And this is called the unique class traits. And he digs into, various classes, all these distinguishing factors of Pantheon. And as a nice bonus, he adds a little bit of lore in there. Really nice. Gotta appreciate that. It's all pretty succinct too, actually. In that note, though, it is pretty like basic video. And I think I was talking to you like, it might be a little bit outdated in some things, but it's still really nice. And it's like high quality video, especially for his own audience to get informed about Pantheon. So love seeing him back in the race.
Yeah. Making videos about the classes in Pantheon is content that you can basically, everybody can enjoy, because that's one of the most popular topics in the Pantheon, community is class design. So
yeah, true.
You can never go wrong with that, and fully enjoy. I really enjoyed that. I told you before we started recording, I really liked that one.
Yeah, this is really good, really good. And so here's another fun one. Kind of speaking on folks that we don't see content from all the time. Rakus Talent. They've been, I guess, pretty busy lately, and so we haven't really seen much. But he put out a video, kind of a what would you call, like, talking head video, I guess. And that's generally kind of just speaking why he's really hoping for Pantheon in comparison to a lot of the modern hack and slash kind of style MMOs that are just like, that's kind of the thing now, And so he gets pretty into it, which is pretty fun. And I don't know, it's really fun to see him energized about why Pantheon, even though it's not action combat or whatever, is still just really resonating with at least a certain like group of people, right? Yeah.
He seems like a very, he seems like a very positive person, and he's got that fun accent that sort of lends,
Yes.
To a really energized positivity. So I like his stuff too.
Yep. And the last Pantheon video, I'm happy to say this is from our wonderful Heart of Gold from across the pond, Reese and Revelry. They're doing this just wonderfully narrated video about the dungeons of Pantheon. And this is kind of a group of information about a single topic, more from a lot of the stuff earlier this year, but again, it's really well scripted, narrated. I would say it's his best video yet. So makes me really look forward to seeing more from him.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch that one yet, but I'm going to watch it tonight.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, this last kind of thing, I think this is a bit of left field to me, but a little shout out here. So mmobomb.com, which I love saying, by the way.
It's fun to say.
So they do a podcast. I believe it's called Always Online.
The Always On, Always Online.
Yeah, and
I was listening to it on the way home. I'm going to correct myself.
Right.
You keep talking. I'll look it up real quick.
Okay. Because I don't want to mess that up. But
Always Online podcast. Yes.
Awesome. So they do this podcast. It seems like weekly on MMO landscape, new MMOs, current MMOs, whatever. And I've got to point out that Pantheon's shown up in a few of their recent episodes, and naturally in the one last week they immediately kind of bring up how long it's been in development, and they get into some other things too. But in the end, it's kind of like there's a bit of different takes from. They had like 3 people on. And I definitely feel like some of them probably follow Pantheon a little bit closer than others. but yeah, at least it looks like they're generally like kind of cautiously keeping an eye on it. But what was really interesting was they tweeted something out. I think after their last podcast.
Yeah, it was really cool. So they were looking for comments from people who had played. Had a chance to play Pantheon. So as you know, myself and Bazgrim, minus when he was still with us at Pantheon Plus, and Nathan Napalm had the chance to play. So I took it as the opportunity to drop a comment on their webpage, their podcast webpage, sharing some of my experience, which I did. And Bazgrim did as well, which is awesome. So I went really long, and Bazgrim went even longer. I talked about Fortress Devair and what we did and what we got to play and everything you've seen. I mean, this is all stuff that people saw in our content in the video because they asked for it, and I was happy to oblige. So I listened, and it's funny because I was waiting to hear the next episode because I wanted to hear what they said. They brought it up, and it just aired. So again, peeling back the curtain, we're recording right now. It's Friday. On my drive home from work, just before we started recording, I was listening. The episode just came out, and I was like, "Oh, I want to hear it. So I was sort of like scrubbing through a little bit to find the spot, and I found it. And they mentioned our comments, and it was really nice. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like cross promotion and people just taking other people's content and using it to be accurate and to speak, from an informed perspective on it. And I really, really appreciated them doing this, and shout out to them because this podcast is now on my regular rotation list, and I need more podcasts on my rotation list. And if they're going to talk Pantheon, like even if they're not going to talk Pantheon, I'll still listen to it. But like I'm definitely going to be keyed in listening for more Pantheon talk. And I really like the hosts. They sound really great. They have good opinions, interesting stuff to say. So yeah, this is really exciting for me.
Yeah, this is just a really fun surprise that they would reach out. And I've had my suspicions that MMO Bomb has been at least not overly negative in their article coverage of Pantheon, which has been really appreciated, right? And obviously they still had some co-hosts that are very like not on board. Which is fine. But this was just so great because, even from that place, they're willing to reach out and get some firsthand experience. So again, huge props to them. they really condense you guys' comments. Because
quite a bit.
I think it ended up coming up about like 52 minutes in or so. And so they didn't have much more time. So they really condensed it down, but it was just, Anyway, it was very nice. Can't wait to hear and see more from MMOBomb.com. Hopefully they can keep a close eye on Pantheon and see their suspicions start to fall off.
Agreed. I think so. I'm going to be listening for that.
All right. Well, I guess my last little disclaimer, because we are at the end of the spotlight, and it's been quite a spotlight. But just keep in mind, if you want a quick reference to get right to any of the things that we've mentioned in the spotlight and the community discussion and the whole show, check the show notes. Easy links. I try to make it super simple for you guys. So go check those out. And this is going to be it for this week's Community Spotlight.
Sit back and relax. It's time for the lore you know. All right, it's time for lore. And having finished part 1, we embark on part 2 of Tales from the Fire, the one between the winds. This story finds us in the Rowan Mountains, just outside of Fairthale, following the journey of an ashen elf named Savin. Now, who is Savin? Well, he's a wizard by trade, but more importantly, he's an envoy of the Elven governance. And what is his mission? Well, that we don't know yet. But we begin with a brief description of the many biomes of Fairthale, such as the Red Grove and the Lake of Mourning, and more than that. So listen along to the writing of Pantheon's lore master J.N. Gerhardt as I read this wonderful tale.
It was early morning, and a heavy fog sat in the quiet wood. Dense as a cloud, the fog meandered through thickets and over footpaths like the frayed ends of a white and billowy dress. And like a cloud, the fog was not idle, but moved as one tall and gentle stream. To pass through it would wet your skin, and the floor of the wood was pregnant with dew. The wood was known as Red Grove, and though the trees were neither the oldest nor the youngest on Kingsreach, they alone had leaves colored with deep crimson and a white, peeling bark. Those leaves were red, not from an autumn that comes and goes as a herald of winter, but an autumn that never ends. For this is the ever-autumn of Fairthale, home of the elves of the fabled Lucent Tree, once of the planet Seolane, and now of Terminus. The creatures of Red Grove were known as wander beasts, a term that describes the group fairly, but did not suit any single creature altogether well. Here roamed the small drolings, and the tall Gaelu, winged foxes called Enfields, and, on occasion, a brazen fay. Even a pair of Spriggan dwelt herein, though none would confuse their kind for a mere wander beast. None of these creatures were particularly evil, and a few were quite good, yet all saw the fog as a comforting curtain of night. The mist continued its sprawl up the incline of Red Grove, gathering in a hem at the shoreline of the lake called the Pool of Mourning. The fog hugged the air in a perfect curve, as if it were the arched spine of a slumbering feminine form. This quirk of nature is called the Maiden of Mourning, and clouds of mist hung above the water's surface like tangles of the maiden's unkempt hair. Her breathing mirrored the faraway sounds of the two waterfalls that fed into the pool on the opposite side. Frozen gusts of air fell from the Rowan Mountains high above the falls, creating a foundry of mist that birthed the maiden, the fog, and the climb of the Red Grove itself. In the moments before dawn, the maiden slept most peacefully. At the far end of the Red Grove stood a temple built upon a broken piece of mountain known as the Adytum of Aelos, also called the Dawn Approaching. Aelos is a giver of prophecy, said to be the first who sees Tolam in his darkness unknown. Upon the Adytum, the rays of Syros, the son of Terminus, would first fall. At dawnlight, the temple's marble columns burn as heralds for the coming morn. For the Rowan Mountains make the rising sun difficult to observe, and the light upon the Adytum signaled for all the day was at hand. Swift rays of sunlight, aided the garment of fog gathered at the base of the temple summit. Soon, Red Grove's brilliant colors were being revealed beneath the fading mist. The heat of Syros made the vapors of forest fog leap like dancers put to flight. Each seemed to hide in the face of a fallen red leaf, with only a kiss of dew left on their crimson lips. On a cliff pass, high in the Rowan Mountains, a silhouette watched the valley turn from night to day. The wind kicked at the edges of his cloak, mocking his stillness with taunts of what lay ahead. The wind barked at him with anger, spitting snow from a throat of ice and stone. He turned his face toward it without expression. This bluff marked the start of the floor of heavens, an elvish name meant to describe the heights so great they reached the foyer of the celestial realm. Peaking plateaus such as this one were like balconies in the stars, some even used as holy sites for the elves nearly 1,000 years ago. Still, this trail could lead all the way to the frozen heart of the Rowans, if one so desired to take it. The figure would not do so. His quarry was nearer at hand, and under a different sort of frost. His name was Savin. He was not fond of the cold, but his teeth did not chatter. He had been to the floor before, though not for many years, and could still recall the cracks in each boulder, like the scars on a looming giant's body. He remembered how the wind caused specks of ice to cut at his eyes, how preferable the ice was to the blade-like stones it threw further up the mountain. Savin was an Ashen Elf, and often served as an envoy on matters of state for the Anadem Council. His habits of study and skill of memory garnered him the reputation in the course beyond Fairthale, and his ability to discern the truth in a moment put even his friends on edge. Savin was something of a wizard, though he considered that reputation of secondary importance. Beneath a hood, Savin's hair was several shades of gray, twisting in 3 separate braids that fell below his waist. His face did not look old despite the gray, though his eyes reflected a life of many years. His skin was pale, but not sickly, and below the center of each eye was a vertical line of symbols, cresting unevenly over each cheek. Across his back was a rod wrapped in unimpressive cloth, the head wider than the body. His cloak was dark slate, woven from countless threads, but without bulk. It had no ornamentation, save for silver clasps that fastened up the left side of his chest. Upon the back of each hand were similar markings to those under his eyes, though these were interwoven with what looked like writings or scripture. On his feet were leather boots, oddly brown, the only piece of clothing that suggested he took the dreadful cold seriously. The boots were sunk in a blazon of frozen fog that rolled slowly over the cliff's edge. Savin spoke a word, or rather sang it, and there appeared between his thumb and pointer something of a quill pen. Yet the quill was not a bird's feather, but instead an insect's prismatic wing. With this tool he drew invisible lines in the air, and there appeared glowing lavender lines in the sheet of frozen fog at his feet, matching stroke for stroke. As Savin drew, he repeated the single-word song several times over, though it seemed to be out of enjoyment and not to manifest more of the insect quills. Though his pace of verse was slow with whimsy, his pen was decisive and swift. Ro palo, ro palo. In a flurry, he finished the wings, wide and sharp-edged, with crystalline veins. Savin waved his hand, the pen erasing itself in a moment. He knelt and slid bare fingers beneath the snow, cupping and drawing as if it were alive and lifting it from the sheet of fog. From a hidden pocket he produced a handful of shimmering stones, each small as a pebble. He chose one that was red and intricate, looking more like living tissue than a hard gem. Savin slid the stone into the thin body of snow with great care, tenderly smoothing over the wound. The light from his art was fading, helpless as a flower in the snow. He brought his face very near the drawing. "Now," he whispered, "you come with me." The red from the stone mixed with the lavender light, pulsing in a soft rhythm. At once, the wings of the drawing stirred like they were waking from a long sleep. With beat slow and then furious, it struggled to break free. Suddenly, it was not a drawing at all, but a creature fully formed, the lavender lines cradling its snowborn body. Savin stood tall just as the delicate wings of the creature started to flutter and lift out of the snow, the left sticking a moment more than the right. When it left his palm, Savin blew the remaining snow in his hand at the weak beauty, like a gust from the mighty mountains. The creature struggled to regain control, rising and falling with the greater wind. For a moment, it appeared to lose, soaring dangerously close to the cliff's abyss. Yet, Savin did not move a hair as it fell, though his eye did not falter from its flight. The creature gained control, and soon flew stable, circling Savin once in a slow, victorious glide. It perched on his right shoulder. Savin did not smile, though the creature's settling feet seemed to satisfy his aims. The wind was whispering to him now, calming itself with invitation and promise. There were no barks, no biting grains of ice. The mountain was hiding its face behind its glacial beauty. Savin knew better and set the creature in a small box of leather that was nestled in the skirt of his cloak. He kept the lid open for the little pet and pressed on into the rising winds. Yet, as Savin ascended, his preoccupation with the mountain itself seemed to diminish with each step. The wind could howl, he thought, but it was only ever the wind. The purpose of his journey began to assert itself over physical concerns, and it weighed on his mind like snow gathering on a roof.
And that is the lore you know. And if you liked that, I just want to mention too, earlier this week, I put up the full reading of part 1 of Tales from the Fire on our YouTube channel with, fun graphics and some effects and stuff to go along with the audio and the audio to go along with it. So hopefully you like that.
I mean, if you weren't going to shout it out, I was like,
I almost forgot about it because I went up today and I was so busy at work today. And that's why I was like, getting the notes in for this episode this week was getting absolutely down to the wire for me. I was in last minute trying to get everything prepped. So I'm really hopeful next week is not so busy, but even with that, nevertheless, all that stuff, great. I had a great time, Desrin, as usual. And I want to thank you for all your hard work. I got to ask you, are you ready for episode 11-3 next week?
Yes, I love it. We should keep this up through the whole, I feel bad for missing it, the first time, but,
well,
man,
you know what? Crow Singer, our friend Crow Singer, pointed it out. I think she was the one who said, how come you didn't do 11-1? And I said, well, I've got it. 11-2 for next week. You got it.
There we go.
So right on. Right on. So thanks everyone for all your support as always. We always have a good time hanging out with you. And join us next week. Same time, same place. We'll see you then.
See you on the next adventure, folks.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.